The autumn morning mist hung low over Royal Lodge as Sarah Ferguson stepped out onto the stone terrace, her breath visible in the crisp air. At 64, the Duchess of York had weathered many storms in her decades-long relationship with the British royal family, but the conversation she was about to have with the press would mark a turning point that few could have anticipated. Sarah's phone had been buzzing relentlessly for 3 days. Royal correspondents, tabloid journalists, and even international media outlets were all asking the same question. What really happened during that private family gathering at Balmoral Castle the previous month? The incident, which palace insiders were calling the September situation, had supposedly involved Queen Consort Camilla, and what sources described as an unprecedented moment of royal protocol being openly questioned. The Duchess of York found herself at the center of a media storm that began with a single photograph. The image, captured by a long-lens camera during what was meant to be a private family barbecue at Balmoral, showed Sarah standing alone near the castle's famous gardens, while other family members gathered around Queen Consort Camilla on the opposite side of the grounds. Body language experts immediately began analyzing the picture, pointing to what they claimed was obvious tension and deliberate distancing. But the photograph was only the beginning. Within hours of its publication in several British newspapers, anonymous palace sources began speaking to journalists about what they called ongoing tensions between Sarah Ferguson and the Queen Consort. These sources, speaking on condition of anonymity, painted a picture of two strong-willed women who had fundamentally different views about Sarah's role within the royal family structure. The whispered allegations were serious. According to these unnamed sources, Queen Consort Camilla had allegedly made comments during the Balmoral gathering that Sarah found deeply disrespectful. The exact nature of these comments remained unclear, but several royal correspondents reported that they concerned Sarah's past financial difficulties and her continued residence at Royal Lodge alongside her ex-husband, Prince Andrew. Sarah had maintained a dignified silence for 72 hours. Following the advice of her longtime publicist and close friends, who urged her to let the speculation die down naturally. However, as the story gained momentum and began appearing in international media outlets, the Duchess realized that her silence was being interpreted as confirmation of the allegations. The turning point came when her youngest daughter, Princess Eugenie, called her mother in tears after reading particularly harsh commentary about the family situation online. It was then that Sarah Ferguson made the decision that would dominate royal news coverage for weeks to come. She would break her silence and address the allegations directly. Her decision sent shockwaves through both Buckingham Palace and the wider royal establishment. For decades, the unwritten rule had been that family disputes, real or imagined, were never discussed publicly. The tradition of never complain, never explain had been a cornerstone of royal protocol since Queen Elizabeth II's reign, and even after her passing, the expectation remained that family matters would be handled privately. But Sarah Ferguson had always been different from other members of the royal circle. Her previous marriages, business ventures, and public statements had often put her at odds with traditional royal expectations. Friends who knew her well understood that she had reached a breaking point where her loyalty to royal protocol was being outweighed by her desire to protect her daughters and defend her own reputation. The morning she decided to speak publicly, Sarah spent hours walking through the grounds of Royal Lodge, the 30-room mansion in Windsor Great Park that she shared with Prince Andrew. The property, with its sweeping lawns and historic significance, had been their family home for nearly 2 decades. It was here that she had raised her daughters, weathered various scandals, and maintained an unusual but stable post-divorce relationship with Andrew. As she prepared for what would become one of the most significant interviews of her post-royal life, Sarah reflected on her complex relationship with the institution that had both elevated and tormented her. She had always been seen as an outsider, even during her marriage to Prince Andrew. Her exuberant personality, business ventures, and occasional lapses in judgment had made her a frequent target for criticism from both the media and certain members of the royal household. The Queen Consort, formerly Camilla Parker Bowles, represented everything that Sarah sometimes felt she could never be: measured, traditional, and seamlessly integrated into royal expectations. Their relationship had always been cordial but distant, marked by the kind of polite formality that characterized many interactions within the extended royal family. However, recent months had brought subtle changes to the dynamics within the royal circle. King Charles III's reign was still finding its rhythm, and various family members were navigating new roles and responsibilities. Sarah had hoped that this transition period might offer opportunities for renewed relationships and a chance to move beyond old tensions. The alleged incident at Balmoral had shattered those hopes. According to the account that Sarah would later provide, what should have been a pleasant family gathering had become an uncomfortable reminder of her perpetual outsider status. The details of what exactly transpired remained carefully guarded, but the emotional impact on Sarah was evident to those who knew her well. Her decision to speak publicly was not made lightly. She consulted with her daughters, her legal advisors, and even reached out to a few trusted friends within royal circles. The unanimous advice was to maintain her silence and allow the speculation to fade naturally. But Sarah Ferguson had never been one to follow conventional wisdom when her family's reputation was at stake. The interview arrangement was made through carefully negotiated terms. Sarah would speak with a respected royal correspondent in the comfortable setting of Royal Lodge's morning room, surrounded by family photographs and personal mementos that reflected her life's journey from young aristocrat to divorced royal to protective mother and grandmother. As the appointed time approached, Sarah felt a mixture of nervousness and determination. She understood that her words would be scrutinized, analyzed, and potentially used against her in future royal reporting. But she also knew that remaining silent was no longer an option when her daughters were being affected by the ongoing speculation about family tensions. The morning light streamed through the tall windows of Royal Lodge as Sarah Ferguson prepared to share her version of events with the world, fully aware that once spoken, her words could never be taken back. The burgundy velvet armchair had been Sarah Ferguson's favorite spot in Royal Lodge's morning room for nearly 15 years. It was from this same chair that she had conducted countless interviews over the decades, discussing everything from her charitable work to her business ventures, to the occasional clarification about royal family dynamics. Today, however, felt markedly different as she settled into the familiar cushions and adjusted the cream-colored cashmere shawl around her shoulders. Emily Patterson, the BBC's senior royal correspondent, had arrived precisely at 10 o'clock, accompanied by a small camera crew who moved with the quiet efficiency that came from years of filming in royal residences. Sarah had specifically requested Emily for this interview, knowing that the veteran journalist had a reputation for fairness and would ask direct questions without resorting to sensationalism. The preliminaries were brief but cordial. Sarah offered tea from the delicate Wedgwood service that had been a wedding gift decades earlier, and they exchanged pleasantries about the unusually warm autumn weather. But both women understood the gravity of the moment. This interview would either clarify the recent speculation about royal tensions or potentially create even more controversy. Emily began with careful questions about Sarah's current role within the royal family structure. The Duchess spoke warmly about her pride in her daughter's accomplishments and her continued commitment to the charitable causes that had defined much of her public life. Her voice remained steady as she discussed the unique position she occupied as the former wife of Prince Andrew, a relationship that had evolved into what she often described as a modern friendship built around co-parenting and mutual respect. But the conversation's tone shifted noticeably when Emily raised the subject of the Balmoral gathering and the subsequent media reports. Sarah's shoulders tensed slightly, and she paused for several seconds before responding. When she finally spoke, her words were measured but carried an underlying current of emotion that had been building for weeks. Sarah explained that the September gathering at Balmoral had been intended as a relaxed family occasion, an opportunity for multiple generations to spend time together in the informal atmosphere that the Scottish castle had always provided. She had looked forward to the weekend, particularly because both of her daughters would be present with their growing families. The prospect of watching her grandchildren explore the same grounds where she had once played with her own daughters had filled her with anticipation. The first day of the gathering had proceeded smoothly. Family members arrived throughout Friday afternoon, and the evening dinner had been pleasant and unremarkable. Sarah had felt genuinely welcomed and had enjoyed conversations with various relatives about everything from the grandchildren's school achievements to plans for the upcoming holiday season. The incident that would later dominate headlines occurred during Saturday afternoon's informal barbecue. The family had gathered on the castle's south lawn, a tradition that Queen Elizabeth II had established decades earlier as a way to create relaxed interactions away from the formal dining rooms. Children ran across the grass while adults clustered in small conversational groups, creating the kind of natural family atmosphere that rarely occurred during official royal events. Sarah was engaged in animated conversation with several younger family members about her latest writing project, when she noticed Queen Consort Camilla speaking with a small group that included 2 senior household staff members. Initially, Sarah thought nothing of the conversation, assuming it concerned logistical arrangements for the weekend's activities. However, her attention was drawn to the discussion when she heard her own name mentioned. Moving slightly closer while maintaining her conversation about her writing, Sarah realized that Camilla was discussing her living arrangements at Royal Lodge and making observations about what she termed the sustainability of certain family arrangements. The specific comments that followed would later become the subject of intense speculation and careful parsing by royal watchers. According to Sarah's account, Camilla had questioned whether it was appropriate or wise for Sarah to continue residing at Royal Lodge, particularly given what she described as the Andrew situation and its potential impact on the family's public image. More troubling to Sarah were alleged comments about her daughter's positions within the royal hierarchy. Camilla had reportedly suggested that Princesses Beatrice and Eugenie might benefit from more distance from their father's controversies, and that their mother's continued presence at Royal Lodge made such distance impossible to achieve. Sarah's initial reaction had been one of shock rather than anger. She had understood for years that her position within the royal family was complicated and sometimes controversial. Her financial difficulties in the past, her various business ventures, and her unconventional post-divorce relationship with Andrew had all been subjects of public and private discussion. However, hearing these concerns expressed so directly and in front of household staff had felt like a fundamental breach of family protocol. Rather than responding immediately to Camilla's comments, Sarah had chosen to remove herself from the group and spend time with her grandchildren near the castle's garden. The photograph that later appeared in newspapers had been taken during this period of deliberate separation, as Sarah processed what she had heard and considered how to respond. The remainder of the weekend had passed with surface civility maintained, but Sarah had felt increasingly uncomfortable. Conversations that should have been natural and enjoyable became stilted and careful. She found herself second-guessing casual remarks and wondering who else had heard Camilla's observations about her family situation. As she recounted these events to Emily Patterson, Sarah's voice occasionally wavered with emotion. She emphasized repeatedly that her intention was not to create drama or division within the family, but rather to address what she felt were misunderstandings about her motives and her relationship with her daughters. Sarah explained that her continued residence at Royal Lodge was not a matter of convenience or financial necessity, but rather a deliberate choice made in the best interests of her daughters and grandchildren. The property provided stability and continuity for multiple generations, and her relationship with Andrew, while unconventional, had proven to be beneficial for everyone involved. She also addressed the suggestions about her daughters' royal positions, emphasizing their individual achievements and their genuine commitment to their royal duties. Sarah argued that Beatrice and Eugenie had each carved out meaningful roles within the monarchy while maintaining successful careers and families, and that their father's difficulties had not diminished their own contributions. The interview continued for nearly 90 minutes, with Sarah providing context for relationships and decisions that had been the subject of speculation for years. She spoke candidly about the challenges of navigating royal expectations while maintaining authentic family relationships, acknowledging that her approach had not always aligned with traditional protocols. As the conversation neared its conclusion, Emily asked Sarah directly about her future intentions regarding both her royal connections and her living arrangements. Sarah's response was unequivocal. She intended to continue supporting her daughters in their royal roles while maintaining the family stability that Royal Lodge represented for multiple generations. The interview ended with Sarah expressing hope that family differences could be resolved privately and that the focus could return to the positive work being done by various royal family members. However, the careful phrasing of her responses suggested that significant tensions remained unresolved. As Emily Patterson and her crew packed their equipment and prepared to leave Royal Lodge, Sarah remained in her favorite chair, gazing out at the gardens where her daughters had played as children. She understood that her decision to speak publicly would have consequences, but she felt confident that she had accurately represented both her position and her intentions. The interview would be broadcast that evening, reaching millions of viewers who had been following the royal drama with intense interest. Sarah Ferguson had broken her silence. But the real test would be how the royal family, the media, and the public would respond to her carefully chosen words. Royal Circle shaken. The aftermath. The BBC interview aired at 8 o'clock on a Tuesday evening, and within minutes, Sarah Ferguson's phone began ringing with such intensity that she eventually switched it off entirely. Social media platforms exploded with commentary, news outlets scrambled to provide immediate analysis, and royal correspondents across the globe worked through the night to file stories about what many were calling the most significant royal interview since Prince Harry's controversial television appearances. Sarah had watched the broadcast from the same morning room where it had been recorded, surrounded by her daughters Beatrice and Eugenie, who had both cleared their schedules to be present for what they understood would be a watershed moment for their family. Prince Andrew had chosen to remain upstairs, though his presence in the house provided moral support, even if he avoided the media spotlight entirely. The immediate public reaction was sharply divided. Social media commentary ranged from overwhelming support for Sarah's decision to speak candidly about family tensions to harsh criticism of what some viewed as a breach of royal protocol that could damage the monarchy's reputation. The hashtag Royal Truth began trending within hours, with thousands of users sharing their opinions about the appropriateness of Sarah's revelations. Traditional media coverage proved equally polarized. Several major newspapers praised Sarah's courage in addressing what they characterized as legitimate concerns about treatment within the royal family. Columnists who had long been critical of royal secrecy argued that her interview provided valuable insight into how family dynamics actually functioned behind palace walls. However, other publications took a markedly different approach. Some royal commentators expressed concern that Sarah's public statements could set a dangerous precedent for other family members who might have grievances with royal leadership. They argued that her decision to bypass traditional family communication channels in favor of public disclosure could undermine the institution's stability. The most immediate consequence of the interview became apparent within 24 hours when Buckingham Palace released an unusually detailed statement. Rather than the brief, generic responses that typically followed royal controversies, the palace issued a three-paragraph statement acknowledging that family relationships sometimes involved different perspectives on complex situations, while emphasizing the importance of private dialogue in resolving such differences. More significantly, the statement included a direct reference to Sarah Ferguson's valued contributions to family life and her daughter's continued success in their royal duties. Royal watchers immediately recognized this language as an attempt to diffuse tensions while subtly supporting Sarah's position regarding her daughter's roles within the monarchy. Behind the scenes, the interview had triggered intense discussions within royal circles. King Charles III, who had been traveling in Scotland when the interview aired, reportedly spent hours in telephone consultations with senior advisors and family members. Sources close to the monarch suggested that he viewed the public airing of family tensions as deeply unfortunate, but recognized the need to address the underlying issues that had prompted Sarah's decision to speak. Queen Consort Camilla's response to the interview became the subject of intense speculation when she canceled two previously scheduled public appearances, citing scheduling conflicts. Royal correspondents interpreted this withdrawal from public engagements as evidence that she was reassessing her approach to family relationships and potentially preparing her own response to Sarah's allegations. The impact on Princesses Beatrice and Eugenie proved more complex than anyone had anticipated. Initially, both sisters issued joint statements expressing support for their mother's right to address inaccurate speculation about family relationships. However, they also emphasized their commitment to maintaining positive relationships with all family members and their hope that private discussions could resolve any misunderstandings. Within a week of the interview, both sisters had separate private meetings with their father, King Charles III. While the content of these discussions remained confidential, sources suggested that the conversations focused on clarifying their future roles within the royal family structure and addressing any concerns about their mother's public statements affecting their own positions. The financial implications of the royal tensions also became a subject of increased scrutiny. Sarah's comments about her living arrangements at Royal Lodge prompted renewed media investigation into the property's ownership structure and maintenance costs. Several financial publications examined the complex arrangements that allowed Sarah to continue residing in the royal property, despite her divorce from Prince Andrew decades earlier. These investigations revealed that the living arrangements were more financially intricate than many had realized. The property's upkeep required substantial annual investment, which was being managed through a combination of royal estate resources and private contributions. Sarah's continued residence was actually providing practical benefits to the overall management of the property, contradicting suggestions that her presence represented a financial burden. As weeks passed, the initial intensity of media coverage began to diminish, but the longer-term implications of Sarah's interview became increasingly clear. Her decision to speak publicly had fundamentally altered the dynamics of how royal family disputes were handled, potentially encouraging other family members to consider more direct communication about their own concerns. The interview also prompted broader discussions about modernizing royal family communication strategies. Younger generations within the monarchy, including Sarah's daughters, began advocating for more transparent approaches to addressing public speculation about family relationships. They argued that strategic openness might actually strengthen the institution's credibility rather than undermining it. 3 months after the interview, the most significant development occurred during the royal family's Christmas gathering at Sandringham. For the first time in several years, Sarah Ferguson was invited to join the family's traditional Christmas Day church service and lunch. Her presence alongside Queen Consort Camilla, both women maintaining cordial interactions throughout the day, was widely interpreted as evidence that family tensions were being successfully managed. The Christmas gathering also provided opportunities for private conversations that had been impossible during the heated period immediately following the interview. Sarah and Camilla were observed having what appeared to be serious but friendly discussions during breaks in the day's activities. While neither woman publicly disclosed the content of these conversations, their improved body language suggested that direct communication was proving more effective than diplomatic silence. Sarah's daughters played crucial roles in facilitating these improved family dynamics. Both Beatrice and Eugenie made deliberate efforts to include their mother in group conversations while maintaining equally warm interactions with Queen Consort Camilla. Their diplomatic skills, developed through years of navigating complex family situations, proved invaluable in creating opportunities for natural relationship building. By the end of the year, royal commentators were beginning to reassess the long-term impact of Sarah Ferguson's decision to speak publicly about family tensions. What had initially appeared to be a potentially damaging breach of royal protocol had evolved into an opportunity for more honest and direct family communication. The incident also established new informal guidelines for how future family disputes might be handled. While public interviews remained far from ideal, the positive resolution of tensions demonstrated that strategic transparency, combined with genuine private dialogue, could actually strengthen family relationships rather than damaging them. Sarah Ferguson's bold decision to address allegations of royal disrespect had ultimately led to improved family dynamics, clearer communication channels, and a more sustainable approach to managing the complex relationships that defined modern royal life. Her willingness to risk criticism in defense of her daughters had not only protected their positions within the monarchy, but had also contributed to positive changes in how the royal family navigated internal challenges. The story concluded not with dramatic confrontations or permanent divisions, but with a gradually strengthened family structure that proved capable of adapting to contemporary communication expectations while maintaining its essential traditions and values.